First Maccabees chapter 12. Now when Jonathan saw that the time was favorable for him, he chose men and sent them to Rome to confirm and renew the friendship with them. He also sent letters to the same effect to the Spartans and to other places. So they went to Rome and entered the Senate chamber and said, "The high priest Jonathan and the Jewish nation have sent us to renew the former friendship and alliance with them." And the Romans gave them letters to the people in every place, asking them to provide for the envoys safe conduct to the land of Judah. This is a copy of the letter that Jonathan wrote to the Spartans. The high priest Jonathan, the senate of the nation, the priests, and the rest of the Jewish people, to their brothers the Spartans, greetings. Already in time past a letter was sent to the high priest Onias from Arias, who was king among you, stating that you are our brothers, as the appended copy shows. Onias welcomed the envoy with honor and received the letter, which contained a clear declaration of alliance and friendship. Therefore, though we have no need of these things, since we have as encouragement the holy books that are in our hands, we have undertaken to send to renew our family ties and friendship with you, so that we may not become estranged from you, for considerable time has passed since you sent your letter to us. We therefore remember you constantly on every occasion, both at our festivals and on other appropriate days, at the sacrifices that we offer and in our prayers, as it is right and proper to remember brothers. And we rejoice in your glory. But as for ourselves, many trials and many wars have encircled us. The kings around us have waged war against us. We were unwilling to annoy you and our other allies and friends with these wars, for we have the help that comes from heaven for our aid, and so we were delivered from our enemies, and our enemies were humbled. We therefore have chosen Numenius, son of Antiochus, and Antipater, son of Jason, and have sent them to Rome to renew our former friendship and alliance with them. We have commanded them to go also to you, and greet you, and deliver to you this letter from us concerning the renewal of our family ties. And now, please send us a reply to this. This is a copy of the letter that they sent to Onias. King Arius of the Spartans, to the high priest Onias, greetings. It has been found in writing concerning the Spartans and the Jews that they are brothers and are of the family of Abraham. And now that we have learned this, please write us concerning your welfare. We, on our part, write to you that your livestock and your property belong to us, and ours belong to you. We therefore command that our envoys report to you accordingly. Now Jonathan heard that the commanders of Demetrius had returned with a larger force than before to wage war against him. So he marched away from Jerusalem and met them in the region of Hamath, for he gave them no opportunity to invade his own country. He sent spies to their camp, and they returned and reported to him that the enemy were being drawn up in formation to attack the Jews by night. So when the sun had set, Jonathan commanded his troops to be alert and to keep their arms at hand, so as to be ready all night for battle, and he stationed outposts around the camp. When the enemy heard that Jonathan and his troops were prepared for battle, they were afraid and were terrified at heart. So they kindled fires in their camp and withdrew. But Jonathan and his troops did not know it until morning, for they saw the fires burning. Then Jonathan pursued them, but he did not overtake them, for they had crossed the Eleutherus river. So Jonathan turned aside against the Arabs, who are called Zebudeans, and he crushed them and plundered them. Then he broke camp and went to Damascus and marched through all that region. Simon also went out and marched through the country as far as Ashkelon and the neighboring strongholds. He turned aside to Joppa and took it by surprise, for he had heard that they were ready to hand over the stronghold to those whom Demetrius had sent, and he stationed a garrison there to guard it. When Jonathan returned, he convened the elders of the people and planned with them to build strongholds in Judea, to build the walls of Jerusalem still higher, and to erect a high barrier between the citadel and the city to separate it from the city, in order to isolate it so that its garrison could neither buy nor sell. So they gathered together to rebuild the city. Part of the wall on the valley to the east had fallen, and he repaired the section called Kaphanatha. Simon also built Adida in Shephelah. He fortified it and installed gates with bolts. Then Trypho attempted to become king in Asia and put on the crown, and to raise his hand against King Antiochus. He feared that Jonathan might not permit him to do so, but might make war on him. So he kept seeking to seize and kill him, and he marched out and came to Bethshan. Jonathan went out to meet him with 40,000 picked warriors, and he came to Bethshan. When Trypho saw that he had come with a large army, he was afraid to raise his hand against him. So he received him with honor, and commended him to all his friends, and he gave him gifts, and commanded his friends and his troops to obey him as they would himself. Then he said to Jonathan, "Why have you put all these people to so much trouble when we are not at war? Dismiss them now to their homes, and choose for yourself a few men to stay with you, and come with me to Ptolemais. I will hand it over to you, as well as the other strongholds and the remaining troops and all the officials, and will turn around and go home. For that is why I am here." Jonathan trusted him, and did as he said. He sent away the troops, and they returned to the land of Judah. He kept with himself 3,000 men, 2,000 of whom he left in Galilee, while 1,000 accompanied him. But when Jonathan entered Ptolemais, the people of Ptolemais closed the gates and seized him, and they killed with the sword all who had entered with him. Then Trypho sent troops and cavalry into Galilee and the great plain to destroy all Jonathan's soldiers. But they realized that Jonathan had been seized and had perished along with his men, and they encouraged one another and kept marching in close formation ready for battle. When their pursuers saw that they would fight for their lives, they turned back. So they all reached the land of Judah safely, and they mourned for Jonathan and his companions, and were in great fear. And all Israel mourned deeply. All the nations around them tried to destroy them, for they said, "They have no leader or helper. Now, therefore, let us make war on them, and blot out the memory of them from humankind." 1 Maccabees chapter 13. Simon heard that Trypho had assembled a large army to invade the land of Judah and destroy it, and he saw that the people were trembling with fear. So he went up to Jerusalem, and gathering the people together, he encouraged them, saying to them, "You yourselves know what great things my brothers and I and the house of my father have done for the laws and the sanctuary. You know also the wars and the difficulties that my brothers and I have seen. By reason of this all my brothers have perished for the sake of Israel, and I alone am left. And now, far be it from me to spare my life in any time of distress, for I am not better than my brothers. But I will avenge my nation, and the sanctuary, and your wives and children, for all the nations have gathered together out of hatred to destroy us." The spirit of the people was rekindled when they heard these words, and they answered in a loud voice, "You are our leader in place of Judas and your brother Jonathan. Fight our battles, and all that you say to us we will do." So he assembled all the warriors, and hurried to complete the walls of Jerusalem, and he fortified it on every side. He sent Jonathan, son of Absalom, to Joppa, and with him a considerable army. He drove out its occupants and remained there. Then Trypho left Ptolemais with a large army to invade the land of Judah, and Jonathan was with him under guard. Simon encamped in Adidah, facing the plain. Trypho learned that Simon had risen up in place of his brother Jonathan, and that he was about to join battle with him. So he sent envoys to him and said, "It is for the money that your brother Jonathan owed the royal treasury, in connection with the offices he held, that we are detaining him. Send now 100 talents of silver, and 2 of his sons as hostages, so that when released he will not revolt against us, and we will release him." Simon knew that they were speaking deceitfully to him, but he sent to get the money and the sons, so that he would not arouse great hostility among the people, who might say, "It was because Simon did not send him the money and the sons that Jonathan perished." So he sent the sons and the 100 talents, but Trypho broke his word and did not release Jonathan. After this Trypho came to invade the country and destroy it, and he circled around by the way to Adorah. But Simon and his army kept marching along opposite him to every place he went. Now the men in the citadel kept sending envoys to Trypho, urging him to come to them by way of the wilderness, and to send them food. So Trypho got all his cavalry ready to go, but that night a very heavy snow fell, and he did not go because of the snow. He marched off and went into the land of Gilead. When he approached Basgamah, he killed Jonathan, and he was buried there. Then Trypho turned and went back to his own land. Simon sent and took the bones of his brother Jonathan, and buried him in Modin, the city of his ancestors. All Israel bewailed him with great lamentation, and mourned for him many days. And Simon built a monument over the tomb of his father and his brothers. He made it high, so that it might be seen, with polished stone at the front and back. He also erected 7 pyramids, opposite one another, for his father and mother and 4 brothers. For the pyramids he devised an elaborate setting, erecting about them great columns, and on the columns he put suits of armor for a permanent memorial. And beside the suits of armor he carved ships, so that they could be seen by all who sail the sea. This is the tomb that he built in Modin. It remains to this day. Trypho dealt treacherously with the young king Antiochus. He killed him and became king in his place, putting on the crown of Asia, and he brought great calamity on the land. But Simon built up the strongholds of Judea, and walled them all around, with high towers and great walls and gates and bolts, and he stored food in the strongholds. Simon also chose emissaries, and sent them to King Demetrius, with a request to grant relief to the country, for all that Trypho did was to plunder. King Demetrius sent him a favorable reply to this request, and wrote him a letter as follows. King Demetrius, to Simon, the high priest and friend of kings, and to the elders and nation of the Jews, greetings. We have received the gold crown and the palm branch that you sent, and we are ready to make a general peace with you, and to write to our officials to grant you release from tribute. All the grants that we have made to you remain valid, and let the strongholds that you have built be your possession. We pardon any errors and offenses committed to this day, and cancel the crown tax that you owe, and whatever other tax has been collected in Jerusalem shall be collected no longer. And if any of you are qualified to be enrolled in our bodyguard, let them be enrolled, and let there be peace between us. In the 170th year the yoke of the Gentiles was removed from Israel, and the people began to write in their documents and contracts, in the 1st year of Simon, the great high priest and commander and leader of the Jews. In those days Simon encamped against Gazara, and surrounded it with troops. He made a siege engine, brought it up to the city, and battered and captured one tower. The men in the siege engine leaped out into the city, and a great tumult arose in the city. The men in the city, with their wives and children, went up on the wall with their clothes torn, and they cried out with a loud voice, asking Simon to make peace with them. They said, Do not treat us according to our wicked acts, but according to your mercy. So Simon reached an agreement with them, and stopped fighting against them. But he expelled them from the city, and cleansed the houses in which the idols were located, and then entered it with hymns and praise. He removed all uncleanness from it, and settled in it those who observed the law. He also strengthened its fortifications, and built in it a house for himself. Those who were in the citadel at Jerusalem were prevented from going in and out to buy and sell in the country. So they were very hungry, and many of them perished from famine. Then they cried to Simon to make peace with them, and he did so. But he expelled them from there, and cleansed the citadel from its pollutions. On the 23rd day of the 2nd month, in the 171st year, the Jews entered it with praise and palm branches, and with harps and cymbals and stringed instruments, and with hymns and songs, because a great enemy had been crushed and removed from Israel. Simon decreed that every year they should celebrate this day with rejoicing. He strengthened the fortifications of the temple hill alongside the citadel, and he and his men lived there. Simon saw that his son John had reached manhood, and so he made him commander of all the forces, and he lived at Gazara. 1 Maccabees chapter 14. In the 172nd year King Demetrius assembled his forces, and marched into Media to obtain help, so that he could make war against Trypho. When King Arsaces of Persia and Media heard that Demetrius had invaded his territory, he sent one of his generals to take him alive. The general went and defeated the army of Demetrius, and seized him and took him to Arsaces, who put him under guard. The land had rest all the days of Simon. He sought the good of his nation. His rule was pleasing to them, as was the honor shown him all his days. To crown all his honors he took Joppa for a harbor, and opened a way to the isles of the sea. He extended the borders of his nation, and gained full control of the country. He gathered a host of captives. He ruled over Gazara and Bethzur and the citadel, and he removed its uncleanness from it, and there was none to oppose him. They tilled their land in peace. The ground gave its increase, and the trees of the plains their fruit. Old men sat in the streets. They all talked together of good things, and the youths put on splendid military attire. He supplied the towns with food, and furnished them with the means of defense, until his renown spread to the ends of the earth. He established peace in the land, and Israel rejoiced with great joy. All the people sat under their own vines and fig trees, and there was none to make them afraid. No one was left in the land to fight them, and the kings were crushed in those days. He gave help to all the humble among his people. He sought out the law, and did away with all the renegades and outlaws. He made the sanctuary glorious, and added to the vessels of the sanctuary. It was heard in Rome, and as far away as Sparta, that Jonathan had died, and they were deeply grieved. When they heard that his brother Simon had become high priest in his stead, and that he was ruling over the country and the towns in it, they wrote to him on bronze tablets to renew with him the friendship and alliance that they had established with his brothers Judas and Jonathan. And these were read before the assembly in Jerusalem. This is a copy of the letter that the Spartans sent. The rulers and the city of the Spartans, to the high priest Simon, and to the elders and the priests and the rest of the Jewish people, our brothers, greetings. The envoys who were sent to our people have told us about your glory and honor, and we rejoice at their coming. We have recorded what they said in our public decrees as follows. Numenius, son of Antiochus, and Antipater, son of Jason, envoys of the Jews, have come to us to renew their friendship with us. It has pleased our people to receive these men with honor, and to put a copy of their words in the public archives, so that the people of the Spartans may have a record of them. And they have sent a copy of this to the high priest Simon. After this Simon sent Numenius to Rome with a large gold shield, weighing 1,000 minas, to confirm the alliance with the Romans. When the people heard these things, they said, How shall we thank Simon and his sons? For he and his brothers and the house of his father have stood firm. They have fought and repulsed Israel's enemies, and established its freedom. So they made a record on bronze tablets, and put it on pillars on Mount Zion. This is a copy of what they wrote. On the 18th day of Elul, in the 172nd year, which is the 3rd year of the great high priest Simon, in Asaromel, in the great assembly of the priests and the people and the rulers of the nation and elders of the country, the following was proclaimed to us. Since wars often occurred in the country, Simon, son of Mattathias, a priest of the sons of Joarib, and his brothers, exposed themselves to danger and resisted the enemies of their nation, in order that their sanctuary and the law might be preserved. And they brought great glory to their nation. Jonathan rallied the nation, became their high priest, and was gathered to his people. When their enemies decided to invade their country and lay hands on their sanctuary, then Simon rose up and fought for his nation. He spent great sums of his own money. He armed the soldiers of his nation and paid them wages. He fortified the towns of Judea and Bethzur on the borders of Judea, where formerly the arms of the enemy had been stored, and he placed there a garrison of Jews. He also fortified Joppa, which is by the sea, and Gazara, which is on the borders of Azotus, where the enemy formerly lived. He settled Jews there, and provided in those towns whatever was necessary for their restoration. The people saw Simon's faithfulness and the glory that he had resolved to win for his nation, and they made him their leader and high priest, because he had done all these things, and because of the justice and loyalty that he had maintained toward his nation. He sought in every way to exalt his people. In his days things prospered in his hands, so that the Gentiles were put out of the country, as were also those in the city of David in Jerusalem, who had built themselves a citadel from which they used to sally forth and defile the environs of the sanctuary, doing great damage to its purity. He settled Jews in it, and fortified it for the safety of the country and of the city, and built the walls of Jerusalem higher. In view of these things, King Demetrius confirmed him in the high priesthood, made him one of his friends, and paid him high honors. For he had heard that the Jews were addressed by the Romans as friends and allies and brothers, and that the Romans had received the envoys of Simon with honor. The Jews and their priests have resolved that Simon should be their leader and high priest forever, until a trustworthy prophet should arise, and that he should be governor over them, and that he should take charge of the sanctuary, and appoint officials over its tasks, and over the country and the weapons and the strongholds, and that he should take charge of the sanctuary, and that he should be obeyed by all, and that all contracts in the country should be written in his name, and that he should be clothed in purple and wear gold. None of the people or priests shall be permitted to nullify any of these decisions, or to oppose what he says, or to convene an assembly in the country without his permission, or to be clothed in purple, or put on a gold buckle. Whoever acts contrary to these decisions, or rejects any of them, shall be liable to punishment. All the people agreed to grant Simon the right to act in accordance with these decisions. So Simon accepted, and agreed to be high priest, to be commander and ethnarch of the Jews and priests, and to be protector of them all. And they gave orders to inscribe this decree on bronze tablets, to put them up in a conspicuous place in the precincts of the sanctuary, and to deposit copies of them in the treasury, so that Simon and his sons might have them. 1 Maccabees chapter 15. Antiochus, son of King Demetrius, sent a letter from the islands of the sea to Simon, the priest and ethnarch of the Jews, and to all the nation. Its contents were as follows. King Antiochus, to Simon the high priest and ethnarch, and to the nation of the Jews, greetings. Whereas certain scoundrels have gained control of the kingdom of our ancestors, and I intend to lay claim to the kingdom, so that I may restore it as it formerly was, and have recruited a host of mercenary troops, and have equipped warships, and intend to make a landing in the country, so that I may proceed against those who have destroyed our country, and those who have devastated many cities in my kingdom. Now, therefore, I confirm to you all the tax remissions that the kings before me have granted you, and a release from all the other payments from which they have released you. I permit you to mint your own coinage as money for your country, and I grant freedom to Jerusalem and the sanctuary. All the weapons that you have prepared, and the strongholds that you have built, and now hold, shall remain yours. Every debt you owe to the royal treasury, and any such future debts, shall be cancelled for you from henceforth and for all time. When we gain control of our kingdom, we will bestow great honor on you and your nation and the temple, so that your glory will become manifest in all the earth. In the 174th year, Antiochus set out and invaded the land of his ancestors. All the troops rallied to him, so that there were only a few with Trypho. Antiochus pursued him, and Trypho came in his flight to Dor, which is by the sea, for he knew that troubles had converged on him, and his troops had deserted him. So Antiochus encamped against Dor, and with him were 120,000 warriors and 8,000 cavalry. He surrounded the town, and the ships joined battle from the sea. He pressed the town hard from land and sea, and permitted no one to leave or enter it. Then Numenius and his companions arrived from Rome, with letters to the kings and countries, in which the following was written. Lucius, consul of the Romans, to King Ptolemy, greetings. The envoys of the Jews have come to us as our friends and allies, to renew our ancient friendship and alliance. They have been sent by the high priest Simon and by the Jewish people, and have brought a gold shield weighing 1,000 minas. We therefore have decided to write to the kings and countries that they should not seek their harm, or make war against them, and their cities and their country, or make alliance with those who war against them. And it has seemed good to us to accept the shield from them. Therefore, if any scoundrels have fled to you from their country, hand them over to the high priest Simon, so that he may punish them according to their law. The consul wrote the same thing to King Demetrius, and to Attalus, and Ariathes, and Arsaces, and to all the countries, and to Sampsames, and to the Spartans, and to Delos, and to Mindos, and to Sicyon, and to Caria, and to Samos, and to Pamphylia, and to Lycia, and to Halicarnassus, and to Rhodes, and to Phasaelis, and to Cos, and to Sidon, and to Aradus, and Gortyna, and Cnidus, and Cyprus, and Cyrene. They also sent a copy of these things to the high priest Simon. King Antiochus besieged Dor for the second time, continually throwing his forces against it, and making engines of war. And he shut Trypho up, and kept him from going out or in. And Simon sent to Antiochus 2,000 picked troops to fight for him, and silver and gold, and a large amount of military equipment. But he refused to receive them, and broke all the agreements he formerly had made with Simon, and became estranged from him. He sent to him Athenobius, one of his friends, to confer with him, saying, You hold control of Joppa and Gazara, and the citadel in Jerusalem. They are cities of my kingdom. You have devastated their territory, you have done great damage in the land, and you have taken possession of many places in my kingdom. Now then, hand over the cities that you have seized, and the tribute money of the places that you have conquered outside the borders of Judea. Or else pay me 500 talents of silver for the destruction that you have caused, and 500 talents more for the tribute money of the cities. Otherwise we will come and make war on you. So Athenobius, the king's friend, came to Jerusalem, and when he saw the splendor of Simon, and the sideboard with its gold and silver plate, and his great magnificence, he was amazed. When he reported to him the king's message, Simon said to him in reply, We have neither taken foreign land nor seized foreign property, but only the inheritance of our ancestors, which at one time had been unjustly taken by our enemies. Now that we have the opportunity, we are firmly holding the inheritance of our ancestors. As for Joppa and Gazara, which you demand, they were causing great damage among the people and to our land. For them we will give you 100 talents. Athenobius did not answer him a word, but returned in wrath to the king, and reported to him these words, and also the splendor of Simon, and all that he had seen. And the king was very angry. Meanwhile Trypho embarked on a ship, and escaped to Orthosia. Then the king made Cendebeus commander-in-chief of the coastal country, and gave him troops of infantry and cavalry. He commanded him to encamp against Judea, to build up Kedron, and fortify its gates, and to make war on the people, but the king pursued Trypho. So Cendebeus came to Jamnia, and began to provoke the people, and invade Judea, and take the people captive, and kill them. He built up Kedron, and stationed horsemen and troops there, so that they might go out and make raids along the highways of Judea, as the king had ordered him. 1 Maccabees, chapter 16. John went up from Gazara, and reported to his father Simon what Cendebeus had done. And Simon called in his 2 eldest sons, Judas and John, and said to them, My brothers and I and my father's house have fought the wars of Israel from our youth until this day, and things have prospered in our hands, so that we have delivered Israel many times. But now I have grown old, and you, by heaven's mercy, are mature in years. Take my place and my brothers, and go out and fight for our nation, and may the help that comes from heaven be with you. So John chose out of the country 20,000 warriors and cavalry, and they marched against Cendebeus, and camped for the night in Modin. Early in the morning they started out and marched into the plain, where a large force of infantry and cavalry was coming to meet them, and a stream lay between them. Then he and his army lined up against them. He saw that the soldiers were afraid to cross the stream, so he crossed over first, and when his troops saw him, they crossed over after him. Then he divided the army and placed the cavalry in the center of the infantry, for the cavalry of the enemy were very numerous. They sounded the trumpets, and Cendebeus and his army were put to flight. Many of them fell wounded, and the rest fled into the stronghold. At that time Judas, the brother of John, was wounded, but John pursued them until Cendebeus reached Kedron, which he had built. They also fled into the towers that were built in the fields of Azotus, and John burned it with fire, and about 2,000 of them fell. He then returned to Judea safely. Now Ptolemy, son of Arbuebus, had been appointed governor over the plain of Jericho. He had a large store of silver and gold, for he was son-in-law of the high priest. His heart was lifted up. he determined to get control of the country, and made treacherous plans against Simon and his sons to do away with them. Now Simon was visiting the towns of the country, and attending to their needs, and he went down to Jericho with his sons Mattathias and Judas, in the 177th year, in the 11th month, which is the month of Shebat. The son of Abubus received them treacherously in the little stronghold called Doc, which he had built. He gave them a great banquet, and hid men there. When Simon and his sons were drunk, Ptolemy and his men rose up, took their weapons, rushed in against Simon in the banquet hall, and killed him and his 2 sons, as well as some of his servants. So he committed an act of great treachery, and returned evil for good. Then Ptolemy wrote a report about these things, and sent it to the king, asking him to send troops to aid him, and to turn over to him the towns and the country. He sent other troops to Gazara to do away with John. He sent letters to the captains asking them to come to him, so that he might give them silver and gold and gifts. And he sent other troops to take possession of Jerusalem and the Temple Hill. But someone ran ahead and reported to John at Gazara that his father and brothers had perished, and that he has sent men to kill you also. When he heard this, he was greatly shocked. He seized the men who came to destroy him and killed them, for he had found out that they were seeking to destroy him. The rest of the acts of John and his wars, and the brave deeds that he did, and the building of the walls that he completed, and his achievements, are written in the annals of his high priesthood, from the time that he became high priest after his father.